Yeah.
Happy to see it. It's time for the president to walk out in just a white suit. That's what I want to see. You know, he has to wear red, white, and blue. It doesn't have to be a blue suit, man. Could be a red suit and a white tie and a blue shirt.
Something good.
Yeah.
Do you remember do you remember the one day Obama wore a tan suit?
Oh,
and he never heard the end of it. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's like,
I'm telling you, you got to break through those walls. You got to break through that wall.
But it broke him and put him back into his place, though. I don't think he ever did it again.
Walk out to Congress in a white suit. You wouldn't even. No one could even hear what you're talking about. All the oohing and awing would drown out the speech. I guarantee it. All right, let me kick this thing off. It made me feel like a tool. Did you know what I'm talking about? The Minnesota childcare fraud, that whole video thing. It was just took X in my X feed anyway by just that's anything anyone was talking about for like 3 or 4 days. Unfortunately, like 2 weeks ago. The problem is we're like a good week behind the news cycle on this show, but that gives us time just to sort of think about and digest and reflect. You know? So
to get to the root.
Exactly. And I have been doing some reflection, and I wanted to try to figure out why this bothered me so much. Like there were other frauds out there. And in this episode, we're going to just quickly go over 3 other examples of fraud. 2 have been recent. 1 is sort of in the distant past, and then compare it to this one. And I want to try to explain, in my view, in some reflection that I did, why it impacted me as much as it did.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with the just what Nick Shirley and that guy David was able to do was start to undermine, I think, 2 lessons that you, me, and like everyone watching has sort of just known about since they were kids. And those lessons are, work hard and succeed, and crime does not pay. These are like morals of fairy tales that you and I have read.
American values.
Watching this actually happen like in real life, it makes you start to question those. And it just makes you feel like
scale.
Exactly. We're going to talk about like the different components, I think, of this fraud. Scale is one of them. And I'll show you, I think, 2 of the other main critical ones. Kind of the last thing, the question that has been posed by Nick and David to the broader society is like, are those 2 lessons still valid? And that's something for the administration to answer for us. It's like, should I feel like a tool or not? I mean, it was like insulting watching those videos to me personally. And I think that's why, because it just like undermined, like, what am I doing? Am I an idiot? Am I an idiot for following the law and paying my taxes, know, and not trying to defraud the government?
Following the rules.
Am I a moron? Am I a tool? Chapter 1 here. Let's just go over real quick that Minnesota childcare fraud. Did you watch that video? It's like 40 minutes or something. It's like
I got the gist of it. I did not watch the whole thing. I saw a small amount. It made me very angry just very quickly. And I know I'm going to be bombarded with this now for days. I
know what you mean. I watched like half of it and I could like barely stomach it. But it's pretty simple. I mean, this guy, he's like a 23-year-old kid. He got in touch with David. Now, I think David, honestly, is probably like the real hero. I mean, we talked about Nick and all that. He's the one who brought the camera. But David is the one who was independently investigating all of this stuff and got the numbers and the addresses and kind of all that.
Should you give like a very quick background on like who the people are? Because I actually don't even know.
Oh, I mean, that's pretty much the whole background. So Nick Shirley is just a YouTuber, 23-year-old kid who's put up some YouTube videos. And then David is like some guy in Minnesota who in his off time investigated why these daycares that he was driving by every day didn't have any kids in them. Basically, Nick just, he and David get a camera. They go to the address. They start knocking on doors and they're just kind of just show everyone the outside of the building. It's all blacked out. It's locked half the time. They'll knock. No one answers. They'll knock and say like, hey, is this a daycare? Are there kids? I got this kid, Joey. My son, presumably, can I sign him up? And they're all kind of trying to shoo him away and stuff. And, they went to autism centers. They went to they talked about other healthcare ride services. David pointed out that some building would have registered like 20 or something different organizations. that were, supposedly just getting money to provide some sort of service, which they like clearly weren't doing. There was no evidence of any such service. I remember when I just heard about it. So this is before I actually watched the video. Most of these things I don't watch. I'll like be aware that they're talking about this, but I won't actually go and watch the source like material. When I first heard about it, the first thing that occurred to me, the first thing I thought of for a comparison was Michael.
Is Michael Franzese?
Franzese? You know who that is? He was like a mobster from the 80s. He's like a proper Italian mobster. And organized crime. I'm like, this is organized crime. And I was happy to see at the very, very beginning of that video, they basically just said like, it's a duty. It's like a civil duty of mine to point out organized crime. And that's what this is. It's like, it looks exactly like organized crime. So here's chapter 2, right? Previous frauds for some comparison. I wanted to pull just real quick, give you 3 other frauds. We can start with the Michael
Franzese
fraud. And have you heard of that guy? Do you know who that is?
No.
I only heard about him because I was watching these like review videos. There's like a series of videos where they get an expert to like watch clips from movies and then tell you like if it's real or not. They brought a mobster and just see like mobster movies.
Oh, nice.
When I remember one of the feedback things that Michael, I'm gonna screw his name, Franzese said was Joe Pesci. He watched the scene by Joe Pesci, and Mike was like, I don't know where he got this from, but that is exactly how like the mobsters talk and act.
Joe Pesci, without a doubt, is the most realistic, the greatest actor in a mob role ever. He just lights it up. I knew guys like him, so he's real. He portrays a mob guy better than any mob guy that I knew.
Anyway, his fraud was, and like he would purchase gas and sort of resell it, and it would bounce around a bunch of shell companies. Like the Russian mafia apparently was involved. There would be like a paper trail, but then they would never actually remit the taxes that were collected back to the government. They would just, the shell company would like file, for bankruptcy or something, and then just disappear, and they would pocket the tax. And it was like, it's estimated that at his height, he was selling like a third or a half to all the gas in the New York metropolitan area. And he was earning like 1.25 million a month in just profit.
Just him personally.
Might have just been him. He said at his height, he had like helicopters. So he had like forged tax documents. Shell companies were getting set up. No doubt that like lawyers and all that and accountants and stuff were all involved. Sounds kind of complicated, right? Another one, another example of fraud more recently is the PPP loan fraud. So like what PPP loans, those were given out, just to remind you, those were given out to small businesses at the beginning of COVID. It was funded by banks. There were maybe 5,000 lenders in the program. They gave out 1.6 million loans, I think, for like the first round. And there was an approved $342 billion in round 1 of the program. And the objective of it was just to ensure that employers were able to keep paying and keep giving the paycheck to their employees, right? Now, each of these businesses, there were they stood up some rules around who was eligible for them, right? It wasn't anyone. So you had to be a small business. You had to have less than 500 people. There was a set number of things that the PPP loan could actually cover. Like you couldn't get a PPP loan and suddenly turn around and invest it in like a new store or something. It had to go to payroll. There were some other conditions that had to be met, like only businesses that were established before February 15th, 2020 were eligible. So there was a report that went out, and they think about 5,000 loans for $400 million were given to businesses that were established after that, February 15th date. So, it's not unreasonable to assume that's probably fraud. There were, businesses that exceeded the maximum loan amounts based on like just the number of employees. Like there were other stipulations about how much, per employee that you could get from these loans. And,
Right.
Businesses, I think, were just broadly pushing the envelope of how much they could get.
I've got 12 employees. I need a $16
I need
million
a couple.
loan.
I need $16 million. There were like 355 businesses, I guess, that applied, even though they were not eligible in the sense they had too many employees. A huge thing that report covered had to do with how much the forms were incomplete. So like loans were getting sent out to companies that just didn't include employee information, I think. And that was for like billions, and it goes on like this. And all of this could kind of be suggesting that there's probably some fraud going on, but it's hard to say how much exactly was malicious fraud and how much it was just like poor administration. I got a lot of accountants in my family, and we, talked about this and all. And the word that came up was messy. The whole application process was very messy. It was very fast. Rules were changing kind of quickly, and it wasn't sure like what you could and could not do.
That COVID era, that was a crazy few weeks there.
Exactly. Businesses were aware of it. They knew they were. The other thing, like the first round of it, and I was trying to remember back if one of the requirements to be eligible for the PPP loan didn't also involve that you needed the money. That seems like a pretty reasonable thing, right? Like, what if your business has nothing to do with like COVID, or, you're not a storefront that you didn't have to send them home? You're totally fine, but you could still apply. I think in the first round, that was the case. In the second round or something of PPP loans, they did add, like, you needed to show that your revenues went down by 25% or more. But like that first round, it's just a free for all. It's just free money. Anyway, probably a whole lot of fraud in there. Now the third or fourth, depending on how you're counting, bits of fraud is that feeding our future fraud. So this is another one sort of out of Minnesota, nonprofit organization called Feeding Our Future, led by Amy Bach. And they think she and her organization stole about $250 million of federal funds that were intended for a child nutrition program during COVID-19. And so they would just created fake rosters of kids' names. I think some of them were just like randomly generated so that to inflate meal counts and, provide little actual food service. It turns out like about 80 people were charged, I guess, in connection with this scheme.
Wow.
And, a little interesting side note. So we talked earlier about this could be like organized crime. There was a separate scandal that emerged in which a juror was offered $120,000 to acquit the defendant. So some jury tampering and stuff there. Any questions there before we head on to chapter 3 and we discuss like what makes this new fraud on the childcare thing different?
Yeah, so I mean, like your two big examples, I guess, or the recent ones at least, was during COVID. So there is this level of like that was an extremely chaotic period. So there's you got a certain expectation. In contrast to the earlier one that was, just like very sophisticated, well thought out and well executed, presumably like over a long period of time, systematic crime. The COVID one, it was like, I'm sure most of it happened in the course of no more than like a couple of months when all those applications went in, and they basically just rubber stamped all of them and just approve. And like, the government didn't have the resources to properly check them all, and everything was going to shut down. So they just had to, like the perfect breeding ground for fraud. Whereas now today, five years later, you definitely don't have that backdrop.
For what makes this childcare fraud different, I'm going to say there are 3 adjectives that I think for a proper fraud firestorm. And that is, 1 is easy to understand. 2 is that it was widespread. And then 3, and I think most importantly, is that it's blatant. So like of the ones that I mentioned, all of them are pretty easy to understand, except for maybe the PPP one, which you need a little background on the whole administrative process. And then certainly the gas fraud by Mike Mafia. I honestly don't totally understand how that one worked. And I read a little bit about it, but I still don't quite totally get it. By comparison, this childcare fraud thing is very easy to understand. All right. Money's given out, government's giving you money per how many kids that you got in this daycare. You don't have any kids there, but you say you do. Okay. There you go. I summed it up for you. So the other one is the widespread part. And in the other fraud examples, Feeding Our Future, it's not as obvious that was widespread. There's probably more. The Mike Tack gas fraud, same thing. Probably the scheme is put in place elsewhere, not just the New York area. The PPP, I would say, was widespread. I think PPP, I think there were a lot of question marks around that one. But like certainly with the daycare, the child care fraud, there's a couple of moments in that video where like David is like, oh yeah, and you see that building over there? Yeah, that one too. That
last daycare center is that green building right there. And the other daycare center right now is right here.
They just couldn't walk 10 paces without running into like some fraudulent daycare building, like a physical building. But then lastly, and this is definitely, I think, one thing that this fraud example has over all the other ones, and that's how blatant it is. And it's epitomized by that leering sign. You know what I mean? Do you remember that? Like that was bouncing around a lot. It was, this is the Child Leering Center. They couldn't spell learning right. And it's just right there on the board. I've got the other thing that could have bothered me as a parent who's got
people are barely even trying.
They're not trying. They don't have to. It's like, and I just have like,
they don't have to. Wow.
They don't have to. So this is my next point. And this is what I'm trying to like, I've got 2 kids in daycare and I can promise, and let me tell you, daycare is absolutely a seller's market. It is a seller's market. The people selling the daycare service have an advantage. Okay. There is a lot more demand than there is supply. So I have no doubt that there are parents in that area who are looking up daycares and like landed on like 50 spots and just must have known something's up. I've looked at like every daycare within a 20-minute radius of this house. Wow. There's a lot of them, like 10. Most of them did not have any spots, certainly for toddlers. Toddlers are tricky because there's like a certain number of kind of teacher-toddler ratio that needs to be like really high. Mm-hmm. You can't have like 20 toddlers in one room with one teacher. It's like 5 to 1. When you get up to like, when they get a bit older, you can have like 10 or 15 or whatever it is to 1. It's just a lot more manageable. But like toddlers are tough to find. So like, I promise you that there are other parents like knocking on the door or looking for like, and they must have known. It's just David was the only one who had the gall, who had, the bravery to start like digging into this. So, the other thing, and I think another example as to why this is so blatant is the fact that it was quote unquote exposed by a kid with a camera and some guts. Like, I don't mean to take anything away from him. Like what he did was extremely brave, but like, it's not, he just had a camera, walked up and was like, hey, where are the kids? Yeah. Like, oh, you got everything blacked out. It's locked.
Anybody could have done the kids.
Anyone could have done it. Imagine trying to do that with, the gas fraud. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with like the PPP loan fraud?
There would be no reason to even expect any wrongdoing.
How could you PPP loan fraud? How blatant is that? You can't, as an investigative journalist, like, what are you going to do?
That's right. Yeah, that's one of those things where it's like it seems highly probable there's probably a lot of fraud, but yeah, there's no data about it. I don't think there's public records of, here's the loans that went out, that kind of thing.
The other thing that just made, I think that ties this all together, one of my favorite points in that, like the first half of it, honestly, that I watched, had to do where this lady saw Nick and David outside one of the learning centers, and she just started screaming, "Ice, ice, don't open up. Ice, it's ice. You're there with ice, don't open up." And she was like trying to, make sure that, and then Nick and David were talking to her like, "Listen, we're not ice. We're just like 2 guys. My name's Nick Shirley. I got a YouTube channel, and it's like, all we're trying to do is figure out where the kids are. It's like, this place is supposed to have 90 kids. Where are the kids?" And then she's like, "Ice, ice, don't open up." He's like, "Look, not ice. Where are the kids?" Yeah. And there's a moment there where she goes quiet, and you can see her thinking like, actually, that's a good question. It's like, it started,
It's ice.
You do realize that there's supposed to be 99 children in here at this building, but there's no one here. This is a child daycare center.
99 children. Paid $1.9 million this year in CCAP funding. Do you know where the children are?
That just like perfectly, I think, captures just like how easy this is. Easy to understand. It's blatant, right? And it's widespread. So, and I think those two things just made like, that was the perfect fuel. We got the fuel, we got the air, the oxidizer, and then we got the match, all three of those things together. And I think that's what really made this thing take off.
Whenever you first hear about it, there's just a chorus of everybody saying, that's a conspiracy theory. That's not happening. That's not true. That you're a wacko. Don't believe what's right in front of your eyes. And then, okay, it takes a 23-year-old with a camera driving around and just asking people questions.
Yeah.
And it just becomes undeniable.
Exactly. If you watch it, it becomes insultingly undeniable.
Yeah.
You don't want to believe it. But if you watch it, you just can't.
That's I started watching it. No, I couldn't. I was like, I can't. I've seen enough. I've seen enough. Too painful.
What does that mean? When something is so undeniable like that, and now it's public, we're going to talk about our own, you and me, our own toolification. So, like, first, what is a tool, Joe? Do you know? Do you have an idea? It's not a word you hear a whole lot, but I definitely used it growing up.
Yeah, well, I mean,
what's a tool?
In what regard? You know, you could be.
If you're like, that guy's such a tool.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking in like a generalized sense. I was going to say, you got a tool like a wrench, and then you've got like a tool bag.
In this context,
a person
to make me a tool.
Do people still use that now, or are we just giving away our old timey millennial term?
It might be this might be a millennial term. I might be one of those.
But
now.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess for our all the Gen Zers out there, yeah. I mean, I don't even know how to describe a tool.
Someone who can be used or taken advantage of because they're like an idiot or they're too nice. So that's kind of one half of it. The other one is if they're sort of openly insulted. And in an effort not to raise or start a confrontation, they might just eat the insult, like publicly. I'm going to tell you a story about the last time I really felt like a tool before like today. And this whole kind of public fraud thing, a much more personal note, a personal story. Okay. So this is back when I was in New York. Anyone watching has probably felt something like this, where you've felt kind of like a tool when you're working in a group, like whether at work or at school, and you got like a freeloader. So I remember there was a group of 4 of us, and there was this one lady who I was legitimately afraid of.
Afraid of?
I was afraid of her. Yeah. I was afraid of her. And she was just, in hearing her talk about other people sometimes, she would just like casually call them, misogynistic or like worse. And you're just like, wow, I do not want to get on the bad side of this person. In New York, that's like that is an exercise of power, I think, that like how casual you are.
And like at that time period, that was like the SJW. Yeah.
2018 sort of time period. So we would have an assignment. There was 4 of us, and she would just openly admit to not like doing her part. So usually in like other examples of working in a group, they would at least try to come up with an excuse, and then it would be a pattern. She just didn't even. She was just like, yeah, and you could see her start to think of an excuse, and then it was like too hard to think of an excuse. She said, I just didn't do it. And this was just the dynamic. So we had, I would say, 2 of us, me and this other woman, working pretty hard, probably each of us doing like 40% of the work, and then there's this one other guy doing like 20% of the work, and then the one I was afraid of was doing like 0. And I remember like being at the computer, I was cracking away at this thing. I was working hard. And then I'm just like, what am I doing? Like I'm carrying this bad person into like a good grade of an assignment. And I felt like a tool. Like I was totally being taken advantage of. And in my mind, there was a conflict. I was conflicted. On the one hand, I wanted to get a good grade. I wanted to do a good job. But then on the other hand, I didn't want to feel like I was taken advantage of. I didn't want to feel like a tool.
Yeah.
So like, normally you could have, maybe you go to the professor, maybe you confront them directly. And there's another example where there's a freeloader and I wasn't afraid of her and I did confront her and it turned out to be okay. But in this case, that wasn't like, I guess it was an
Too
option, but
frightening.
it's not one I took. I was too afraid of her. So, you know, what did I do? I just put in less effort. I mean, you know, that was my new equilibrium. I was like, I'll turn in a B assignment, right? I mean, they'll get a B. I won't
Right.
have worked as hard, you know, as opposed to really kind of grind away and get an A assignment. So in that sense, I felt like less of a tool, but I also got less of a grade. I think anyone listening, I think, Joe, you would understand that. You understand that emotion. I felt like no one likes to be in that situation and taken advantage of. And I'll say kind of one other thing. I think that facet of human nature is what turns kind of this collectivism idea into the lowest common denominator. It's because hardworking people eventually just feel like tools. They feel stupid for working hard. That's exactly how I felt when, like, this person who didn't do anything, wouldn't even work to hard enough to think of an excuse, you know?
Right.
The only solution to that is some external force. So like you get a third party to force that other person to work. And, you know, I think that's why sort of these collective ideas eventually sort of spiral into oppression because of that. But anyway, that's what a tool is. And you can put this on a graphic. So imagine one in which the y-axis is just the toolishness. And then on the x-axis, you got effort. And I would say it's kind of a downward sloping line. And every individual, I think, has a line like this. And I think some of their personality, the shape of the line is going to be a little different. I think if you're more of a tool, you might have a more vertical line. So you can eat a lot more like toolishness, but still put in a lot of effort. I think some people have a more flattened one. I'll say that as I get older, my tolerance for that has gone down. Like my line's definitely getting a lot flatter.
If I just try hard enough, maybe things will get better from here.
I always worked hard, and I really didn't like confrontation. I think communal efforts to work, you need a lot of tools, or like first force people to be tools.
Yeah. No, I mean, just in general, it's like you look at America, this is like, I don't know, the epitome of civilization up to this point, you know, just highest GDP, whatever you want to say. It's a huge society. It doesn't come from nothing. It's hundreds of millions of people grinding away and trying as hard as they can and making a better future. And what happens when everyone starts feeling like tools?
I think everyone in the world feels like this. I don't think that like Americans or something are like fundamentally more productive. It's just they're working in a system that doesn't make them feel stupid for like working hard.
I think they are.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. I think in my travels, and I lived in China and Russia, one of the big lessons I learned was like people fundamentally are like very like at a population level, they're like the same. I mean, like one of the things I loved about like
go fundamental enough, yeah, but you know, society is
this is what I mean. But this is a fundamental thing. This emotion, this sense of feeling like a tool in this situation, I think is a fundamental facet of human nature. That's what we're talking about.
Getting philosophical here again.
So let me actually address that, because I do not think this is outside of our wheelhouse of economics.
Yeah.
Like, why did I study economics? I am kind of more mathematically and science inclined, and economics certainly has that, but I'm also interested in people. And economics is sort of half mathematics, half psychology, right? I mean, it's considered a social science for a reason, because like the math usually doesn't work out and it's not super predictive, but you have to apply the human factor. Like, just like what we're doing now. I mean, if at the core of this, I'm talking at the broadest sense about like, you know, the economic systems of communism and capitalism, it ultimately comes down to human nature, not math. So I think this is still in our wheelhouse, the toolification, and like what keeps people incentivized to like work hard and all that stuff. So that's my defense. It's my defense there. I still think this counts. Not philosophy. It's just another half of economics. Sociology. The last chapter here is the response. And there are sort of two halves of this response. First is the administration. So that's like Trump. My honor here is on the line. Okay. Am I a tool? Yes or no? And it's like Trump to answer that question. Like, the response by the administration has to be unambiguous. We need a reassertion of those two lessons that we talked about earlier. Crime does not pay, work hard and succeed. Okay. And I think they're on the right track. There's certainly a lot of bluster about it. The White House, I guess, published, here's what the Trump administration is doing to crush Minnesota's fraud epidemic. This was January 2nd. We talked about 1,750 subpoenas executed over 130 search warrants, conducted 1,000 witness interviews, charged 98 defendants. 64 of the defendants have already been convicted. Like, people look like to be, in handcuffs. This administration is spearheading a no-holds-barred effort to hunt down and prosecute the criminals who have exploited Democrats' non-existent oversight to bilk hardworking taxpayers out of billions of dollars. I remember that because of the word bilk. You don't get to see that word.
I was just about to say
you don't get to see that word. That's a great word.
No.
Great word. But the point is, like, in my mind, like, the upper limit of what is acceptable response is like really high. There's a little tear in the, in like the woven fabric of the sort of norms and the morals that I understand that I am currently operating in, and that needs to be unambiguously repaired. The response just has to be so complete. And so, like, January 8th, so this is just earlier today, the fact sheet, President Donald J. Trump establishes new Department of Justice Division for National Fraud Enforcement. Yes. Just like, yeah, okay, your paychecks are tied to finding fraud. Okay? It's like all you're doing now.
Like, to change that developing psychology of toolness. And that's a really tall order.
It's a tall order. That's true. There's, like polls and stuff. You ask kids, like, do you still think that working hard will lead to success? Yeah, I think fewer and fewer people believe today, as compared to, like, 50 years ago, believe that working hard will lead to success. And it's just because of stuff like this. You can just feel it. Okay. Now, so that was the first half of the response. It's like, what is Trump going to do? But we also see that there seems to be another group out there to put up a smokescreen or just deny it somehow. Again, after watching that video and it just being undeniable, there's still articles and stuff out there that go ahead and say, well, wait, let's think about this. So I want to play a little game with you, Joe. We're going to, a new segment here. So it's called, I'm going to play a little game for you. Ready? It's game show time. Game show time. Name that logical fallacy, Joe.
Jeez.
So I'm going to read you a paragraph, and you are going to tell me what logical fallacies are contained in the above, Joe. And it's possible to have multiple answers. Quote, President Donald Trump has long singled out Minnesota's Somali population of approximately 108,000 for criticism and, even before the video emerged, pointed to fraud by members of the community as justification for his claim that Somalis, quote, contribute nothing, end quote, to the U.S. and shouldn't be in the country. Now, what logical fallacies are contained in the above? A, the lucid fallacy. B, appeal to emotion. C, red herring. And or D, guilt by association. Go ahead, Joe.
Let's see. I'm actually not. I feel kind of stupid. I'm not super familiar with red herring and lucid fallacy. It doesn't see. So there's some sort of appeal to emotion in there. Orange man bad. He's saying that Trump says something, a little bit incendiary. There's millions of people that are instantly ready to say, yeah, can't be right. I hate him. I guess also it's like what is it saying? Trump has called it out, therefore it's not happening, or something like that. Like, just because Trump has said things about, XYZ group of people doesn't mean it's not true.
What's your answer, Joe?
I mean,
you're stalling.
No, I mean,
I know.
at least B. B and whatever else I was just trying to describe there. I assume that's a red herring, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I said the answers are B, C, and D. So I think the appeal to emotion is the sense of bullyism, I guess, by Trump on the Somali community. There really has nothing to do with the fraud itself. Like if the point of the article is like what's new, what's not, what is the childcare fraud, firestorm? I think what he's doing is
being reminded about past comments unrelated to what's happening.
Yeah,
is not.
And I think it's intended to elicit an emotional reaction against it. Okay, but it has nothing to do with what just happened. All right. C, kind of similar along this line, a red herring, which just means to like introduce irrelevant topics designed to distract. Similar vein.
Yeah.
And then by guilt by association, I'm going to go ahead and say Trump is, if they can associate anything with Trump and whatever they're talking about, the audience will know that it's bad or wrong. Here's number 2, Joe. The viral video, which had 132 million views on X as of Wednesday afternoon, added a new layer to the controversy that isn't easily unpacked. The video was produced by Nick Shirley, a YouTuber who has created anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim content in the past, and many of his claims could not be immediately verified. So what logical fallacies are contained in the above, Joe? Multiple answers are possible. A, moving the goalposts. B, ad hominem. C, genetic fallacy. D, phantom man.
Definitely ad hominem. They're trying to discredit him because he's created anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim content in the past.
Yep. I think they're trying to imply that he's the R word. Yes.
Yeah, they're trying to. Yeah. Genetic fallacy.
So the genetic fallacy is judging based on origin.
Oh yeah. So I mean that one too. They give you background about this person to portray them in a bad light to try to discredit them.
Okay. Ding
Definitely
ding.
that one. Let's see. And I'm over here on the left Googling phantom distinction fallacy.
I don't think you're going to find phantom man. I actually made that one up for this one. We mentioned it before.
Well,
actually.
I just typed it in. It says a phantom distinction is a logical fallacy that occurs when someone spends time arguing for the superiority of one term over another.
Oh. Well, it's not how I'm using it, how I used it in the past. Phantom man is just, you don't even mention the opposing position. You just sort of hand wave it away.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess everything but A. They're not. I'm sure they're probably moving the goalpost in the next paragraph or two, but at least not in this one.
So I thought I included A in there. I think A is also included. Only
really?
From moving the goalpost usually having to do with you require more and more evidence. In that sense, like what is what you would need to score the goal here. How much evidence do you need? And I think when it says many of its claims could not be immediately verified is somewhat like moving the goalposts. It's sort of a ridiculous thing to say when you don't even need any claims in the video. It's just the fact that they showed you the daycares and like what he did. There were no claims, but like that in and of itself to me was like enough. It was just so bizarre. Like, even if you didn't have David there with the numbers, it's like, what WTF is going on here? This could not be legal.
I thought of like moving the goalposts as like if they were to say something like, sure, it seems like there's some evidence here, but even still, this fraud is a natural byproduct of a functioning government or something ridiculous like that.
That one could be half a point, I guess, maybe for A. Quote, even so, the Trump administration halted federal child care payments to the state and launched a highly visible response as Justice Department officials insisted they had been on top of the matter all along. At the same time, Waltz turned to social media to try to defend his efforts to combat fraud while also attempting to turn public attention toward Trump's own actions. So what logical fallacies are contained? The McNamara fallacy, tu quoque, circular reasoning, or the historian's fallacy?
All right, you're gonna have to define A and B for me. I feel like I'm using my lifelines here.
The McNamara fallacy has to do with if there is like quantitative support for it, then it's going to be superior, I think. So McNamara, he sort of famously went in with like his whiz kids, I guess, to the Department of Defense during the Vietnam War and said like, look, for every one American dead, we're killing like 10 of them, which is a theological fallacy. And tu quoque, that is Latin for you too. It basically, the illogical fallacy is saying, appealing to someone's sense of hypocrisy. So it's like, it's an invalid argument because you do it too.
Yeah, well, it doesn't seem like there's a numerical argument given here. It doesn't seem like there's both parties doing the same thing, like hypocrisy. I don't know. It doesn't seem overly circular. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem circular. I'm kind of whittling these down here, and I can't say I'm super familiar with historian's fallacy either.
So the historian's fallacy is assuming that the past actors had the same information.
Yeah, I mean, Justice Department insisting they had been on top of it all along. I mean, I would assume clearly they weren't, or else we would have known about this, not through a 23-year-old online.
What's the answer, Joe?
This one's not clear. I mean, I guess I got to go with D.
So I think the answer is B, the one I put it together. The you too. And it just has to do with that last phrase. Was when Waltz was like, he went to social media and said, his effort to combat frauds while also attempting to turn public attention towards Trump's own actions. Is him saying, hey, look at Trump. Look at Trump, which is
oh yeah,
it's like, he's doing it.
But like,
he's so much worse.
You two for what?
What do you
Trump
mean?
isn't overseeing widespread fraud.
Well, just
like in his sphere of governance. Yeah,
bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I think that's the play here. I think that's like the tu quoque or whatever. That's
so many of the. So many of these things
just wanted to say that word.
Go back to Orange Man Bad. Just anything that he does must be wrong.
I think it's a common logical fallacy employed. Absolutely.
That's the foundational fallacy of our past decade or so. A big one, at least.
Anyway, we'll see how this turns out. I wanted to... I think a lot of topics, like the reason why I choose the topics that I do, it's just sort of what my mind is drawn to. And certainly just my reaction to that video interested me a lot. Like, why did I react the way I did? So I had to think about it and sort of venting a little bit to you and the audience here. And, I think maybe you would feel the same way. And maybe I can shine a little bit of light into maybe how other people, if they feel similar.
Yeah. We're just like talking about it here a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely feel a little better about the whole thing now. Not because anything changed, but just kind of...
Not yet, but they definitely seem to have gotten the message that this is like a big deal. This is a really big deal. And not just because of the money. It's like, are we all tools?
Yeah. Yeah, it's that psychology. Because if nobody thinks hard work pays off, then we're not going to have this, wonderful society that we have. It's just not going to exist. And that means throughout our lives, it's just going to slowly get worse and worse and worse. And that's just a very bleak future to live in,
About a week late to that news cycle, but hopefully it was a week worth waiting for. And anyway, this has been another episode of the Root of All Evil podcast. I'm Luke.
I'm Joe.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
See you then.